All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Because Football podcast. Today we have Lepe Seetane. Lepe is originally from Lesotho in Southern Africa and is calling to us today from Louisville, Kentucky. Lepe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So now you're currently a graduate assistant coach at Spalding University. It's a Division III school in Louisville. You yourself have experience playing at the Division I level for Northwestern University, and you are also the director of football and head of academy for Kick4Life, an organization in Lesotho. So I know our conversation is going to go a lot of different places today. I'm very excited for that and learning from your experiences and your well-rounded travels. But first thing, I guess, is what are some of your earliest memories of playing this game?
Oh man, that's it's gonna take me really far back. I just remember in the while I was in Lesotho, just playing a lot of soccer. We would create our own with like some plastic bags, and just kind of dabble with that with neighbors, friends, and what would later be teammates in an unstructured way. So a lot of it was just a few kids just wanting to create that experience and actually play, which was beneficial later in life, really.
Absolutely. And do you remember like trying to model yourself after some professionals or superstars? I don't know personally of any players from Lesotho, to be honest. I don't think. But who were some of your like heroes and people you were modeling yourself after as a kid?
Um, the the one the one person that I think played a critical role in trying to figure that out is a gentleman that just actually passed away who was my neighbor. He's a military guy.
Mm,
Um, his name is Lulu Siema. He became my coach, but during his playing days, used to go watch his games, used to walk miles and miles to go watch his games, watch him play. He later, became my coach. And, you know, while he was coaching me, I was also watching his son, who's a prominent coach in the South African Premier League by now.
okay.
Lesotho Siema, he was an internet, he was a national team captain, a guy from my backyard, just kind of trying to follow those footsteps. There's a lot of guys in Lesotho. I mean, the list is long. There's Tabane Sutu, who's currently actually here in Louisville, coaching in Louisville City. He went to coach at the MLS. It was at Orlando. For
Okay.
years being a goalkeeper coach there. Those are the guys that I looked up to and just kind of wanted to follow that route.
Excellent. Well, first, I'm sorry very much for your loss of your mentor, Mr. Siema. I want to remember him and the impact that he had on you, and I'm sure so many kids in your area. So it sounds like you kind of came from a bit of like a football hotbed in Lesotho. Was there something you think about your town, your area that like gave you guys some kind of edge?
I fortunately we were around the military, so the military base is not far from my neighborhood. So fortunately, we had those military personnel being involved in soccer a lot.
Hmm.
I remember the gentleman uh, that in Kosi. He's also one of those guys that has impacted the way I see the game, just because of their involvement in that. And yeah, I would say there's a lot of I'll say there's a lot of talent in Lesotho,
Hmm.
and a lot of untapped talent, that should some of these guys be exposed to a bigger stage, I think they'll be able to represent Lesotho and represent themselves well, just because of, again, some of those upbringings that we've experienced in playing those unstructured small-sided games. Um,
Hmm.
it really helps you with your creativity and reading the game well. It helps with that, just because there's no like formal, hey, do this instead of that. you get to experience those moments by yourself. You get to make those quick seconds decisions
Mhm.
by yourself, which it does help in the long run.
So you spend your time really forming as a player and a person in Lesotho, and then big change when you're about 13, 14 of moving to Louisville. So what was that like for you, I guess, first from a soccer point of view? Like you go from playing like a little bit, sounds like some structure, back at home in the town, but mostly just playing on your own with whatever you had with everybody in the neighborhood. And then all of a sudden big life change. So what are some of your first memories of playing like in the US and maybe some of those differences?
I can't get into that without actually telling the full story behind it. Um,
Please.
yeah, so fortunately, when I was around 13, 14, I was fortunate enough that one of the coaches, the local coaches, um, you know, watched me at some tournament and decided they're gonna recruit me to come play for the club there. The club is called Hunters FC, still exists. They have some
Okay.
academies, and they have a pretty good structure. They had a pretty good structure then for developing players. So they brought me in with a few guys, and you know, fortunate enough that within that structure, I was recognized, and I was also selected to to experiment and come to the U.S. and see, what I got, what it takes. And fortunately, in 2005, I was able to come to Louisville, um, which was supposed to, was meant to be for a couple of weeks.
Mm,
That ended up in a lifetime, really.
wow.
You know, and moving to Louisville, fortunately, like I said, Tabani was already here. Tabani and his family was already here, so the transition was a bit different. But with a little structure, I thought this would be helpful for me. And once we started playing, that was the stark difference was just the infrastructure and just the level of coaching.
Mm,
Not to say there aren't enough qualified coaches in Lesotho. It's just to say the structure is introduced a little earlier than 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 in Lesotho.
mm,
At the youth level, at U8 level, we have coaches that have credentials that actually know and understand how to coach, versus us just dabbling around in the neighborhood and experiencing and learning new tricks, but on our own versus like with somebody that can
right.
teach you how to do certain things and how to read the game, how to even position yourself. So I think the stark difference was just the infrastructure and just the coaching structures, and even just the equipment itself. Having having soccer balls, having cones, having all that equipment in practice makes a huge difference.
Yeah, some things we don't really think about. If, like myself, growing up in the U.S. and just thinking, well, yeah, you're going to have soccer balls. Everybody's going to have their own ball training, or we know a certain level of quality of field and whatever it is. But I think the point you made about the coach is interesting because it's something I think about a lot. In the US, we have, yes, it is more structured. Now, a lot of times at your smaller clubs, grassroots, it is still sometimes just a dad who may or may not have played the game or know anything about it. Starting at 5 years old, there's structure in the US, right? Like that's just how we do things. There's not much that kids do without structure
Yeah.
in the United States. And so I think obviously on the one hand, there's benefits to that. Hopefully, there's some more safety about things. There's a little more organization with things. Um, but I think when it comes to developing players as well, I always wonder like, is it better to have more of what you had in Lesotho of kind of the unstructured, like that freedom to play, right? So I guess what do you think are some of like the benefits of maybe that unstructured versus having the structure? Like, what do you after experiencing both? What are your thoughts?
I think the biggest piece, honestly, is there's you gotta strike a good balance. There's a certain level where you need structure and need direction. But for creativity purposes, the players need to be allowed to have to make those decisions on their own. Actually, be involved in a way that won't impede their creativity, won't impede their independent thinking. A lot of times, especially talking about um, being coached by parents that haven't had experience playing, it does change that because one, they don't know how to structure that appropriately, whereas coaches will allow some creativity and allow some free play, some free expression. Um, that would in the long run be helpful. But again, there's no right or wrong answer, but I think the mix of both can be very helpful, because again, with young kids, you need to work on those fundamentals and knowing how to appropriately trap the ball, knowing how to appropriately pass the ball. But with a level of freedom that you can experience a back flick, you're doing a heel flick or whatever it may be, without being scrutinized or without being corrected too many times. Just because at that level, that's when we need kids that can think on their own, they can make the decisions on their own, while they're implementing some of the structured techniques that we may teach them in training. But again, you can only do so much as a coach as well. And the game is dependent on players making decisions on their own. If we try to joystick kids and use them as like a video game, it never works because there's so many decisions that have to be made in the game that the coach is trying to make 11 decisions for 11 players every 2 seconds is going to be exhausting. And kids are gonna hate it too because you get to go through every step of the way. It can be very frustrating, and that micromanagement, just taking that piece out of it and actually teaching the kids to independently think and independently make decisions. It's very helpful.
You bring up creativity again. That's something like through all the parents I talk to, when parents come to me with Transform Soccer and their kid wants private training or they want more of our group skills training, whatever it is, or doing our camps, like never ever do I hear the word creativity from any of those parents, right? And a lot of it they don't know, like they don't get it. And I think that's a downfall of like American soccer. It's athletic, there's speed, there's power to it, but like we don't really have. I think it's almost like a lot of people don't know, but we also don't have the patience to be creative because, like you're saying, that creativity that's risky, right? Yeah. Creativity involves risk, right? And it's something that, especially as a coach, if you're fearing, even in a top club, I see it like if you're fearing your team not succeeding because then you're going to get backlash from parents or from your club administration, like. You might say you see the heel flick once or twice from Johnny and it doesn't work and you're going to bench him, right? You're going to pull him out. Yeah. So then what does Johnny think? I can't be doing the heel flick, even though like it could have been the solution to a problem to unlock things. And I think we see that in the American game, especially in the final third, the lack of creativity, and both on the men's and the women's side. And I think it kind of feels to that. But it sounds like then you were kind of obviously through growing up playing unstructured, you had the opportunity to do that. But would you say that creativity piece is like an important ingredient in like Lesotho football, like in the way that you guys just see the game? I know it is certainly for South African football and like the Kasi flavor, I believe, right, of the skills and the technique, and obviously that's one extreme. But what would you say is kind of like the way that you see the game in Lesotho and kind of how you were raised to interpret it?
I'll tell you what, like the huge difference again, and what and the reason behind me saying there's a lot of untapped talent in Lesotho is exactly because of that. There's that creativity, that flavor, that something very, very different that you see from Southern Americans, that you see from Southern Africans, that you don't necessarily see in other continents, where the kid is not scared to try something something new. Obviously, you hope that at the younger age, you hope that that's a controlled environment with the coach present, with the coach learning, teaching kids how to be creative. But there's, like I said, there's a level where you need to figure out, is there a healthy medium? Is there a position where the kid can still experience, can still experiment, and can still do those things that he thinks they're cool, or even his teammates think they're cool,
Hmm.
without getting that backlash from the coaching staff, from fans. Um, Again, I always refer to the Brazilian game because, again, not a lot of people know about the cacique flavor,
Hmm.
with all the tricks and whatnot. The Brazilian game. Why is Brazil being so good? Because, again, they play independent, unstructured soccer for so long until they start moving up the ranks. And there's that freedom. There's that is that I think they call the Samba boys. They are able to
Hmm.
do
Yeah.
what they want, actually express themselves through soccer, and that, I think, that piece of it has really been influential for me in terms of, like, how you can't teach creativity. You just can't.
Hmm.
You can provide environment for creativity, but you can't.
Facilitate.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
you can't necessarily teach it. So I think, again, the way I see the game is based on having that type of freedom, to make decisions on my own. Like you said, the American game, again, you watch every American sport. Everything is controlled by the coach.
Hmm. Hmm. 100%.
Everything. From a point guard running a play um, to a quarterback calling a play.
Yep.
There's also
100%.
a offensive coordinator calling that play. There's a head coach actually giving him thumbs up that this play is okay. Let's run that.
Yeah.
And in soccer, there's not that. In soccer, there's 11 versus 11. The coach is gonna teach you some movements of where to be, when to be there, and how to be, and how to, provide that support. Um, but they cannot call timeout to set a play. They can't. There's no
Hmm.
30-second violation to to run to be able to get a shot off. So I think that those different structures, when you have them in a healthy place, I think they can be very, very important. But you can't have one without the other, or else you're gonna find a static game, where
Hmm.
kids are moving like a robot. You move one here, you have to move the other one has to move. So it's not necessarily,
Exactly.
you're not necessarily joysticking kids to be where they need to be when they need to be there. Versus allow them to make the decision and then try to correct it at halftime and try to correct it in game. Versus actually calling a timeout and bringing them in and actually showing
Hmm.
them where to be, when to be there, and how to run a set play.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And yeah, I think it's a great insight you make about a lot of American sports and like the top down like instruction and decision making. I think about that a lot and I try to tell parents that. And that's what people are used to here. So I think it's a challenge of being a soccer coach in the US too, of like one, you kind of are conditioned to be a little bit like that. Like as an American, our examples of great coaches are in football, are in basketball.
Yeah,
We don't have as many within to like model ourselves after. So that's kind of what we're used to culturally.
yeah.
I'm curious about that too. Like, so you're a baller. You're seen in Lesotho playing that you have so much talent and ability. You get the opportunity to come across to the U.S. That a few weeks turns into a little bit longer than that, as we can see today, right? Where you're sitting now. Um, I imagine that just outside of soccer, that was a big social change for you. And so, but I also imagine that the game must have helped in some way, kind of create these connections and things. You're coming to school, you're coming into a new group of kids that have a different background from you. So how do you think the game helped you like adapt or cope with such a massive life change?
I honestly think the game itself, um, became the way I coped with adjustment, and has had been very helpful and still is. Moving, a continent away, um, at that age, it can be very difficult. But
Hmm.
the game itself has allowed for me to not feel as lost, not feel um, as homesick, just because I was always able to express exactly how I feel through that game. So I think that it plays a huge part, and we can see that with a lot of players. You watch the Premier League, for example. Majority of those guys aren't born in the UK.
Right.
Just moved there, and having that structure, having that soccer, like I have training this morning, I have training in the afternoon, on weekend I have games. It keeps you sane. It keeps you a little grounded to focus on exactly why you're there. And I think that's where I found refuge in. I found that be an escape from me missing home, an escape from me missing some of the things that I miss at home.
And it was like the one thing that was the same or almost the same, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That you had to cling to. And so you're in Louisville, you're playing. Obviously, that's how we had sort of met. We were talking. We encountered each other playing 3v3 soccer down at Disney for the I think it was the Kick It National Championships. And
Yeah.
my team, we thought we were pretty good. Being from Philadelphia, we had won a different national championship for 3v3 the year before, and then we come down to Disney and we're doing okay at the group stage, and we face you guys, I think, in the quarterfinals, and it was a humbling experience for sure. You guys smoked us, but it was a really cool way of us being able to connect, and now years later through LinkedIn. So just briefly want to touch on that 3v3 soccer side of the game, like we talked about some creativity and things. What are some of maybe the benefits of people who have never heard of it or have seen it but thought, that's not real soccer? Like what would you say to parents, to players, as a way for it to benefit their growth?
Like I said, having an unstructured way to play soccer was beneficial. I'll put 3v3 in that category as well. Again, for our team, we didn't have a coach per se, not a licensed coach. We had a parent that just stepped in and just say, "I'll coach 3v3." But what that allowed us is the parents weren't those parents that are gonna be overbearing and try to teach. All they had to do was provide the structure and provide the space and environment to for us to play. And I'm sure you guys experience the same thing, but the 3v3 game is very different. Very fast. You have to make quick decisions. Yeah, it is
Very fast. Yeah.
in an 11v11. You have to make quick decisions, but 3v3, that decisions have to be even faster because the space is smaller. The opponents are quality, and especially that Disney level. I think that's where you start to say, okay, am I good enough to take my soccer to the next level? Am I good enough? Because for me, that was actually one of the bases. I'm like, if I can play in this tight spaces for 30 minutes straight, um, that creativity again comes out because you are forced to be creative. It's 3v3, like I tell people, it's a man marking. You have to stay with your man. You have to stick
Yeah.
with your man. And by the time if you try to figure out a structure in terms of like, oh, let's defend zonally on a 3v3, that's not gonna work
It's
because
over. Yeah.
it takes a split second for me to get a shot off, right?
Yeah.
So that allowed for us as players to be creative again, to be able to learn how to separate ourselves from our men, like learn how to receive under pressure, learn how to control the ball under pressure, learn how to dribble, go 1v1, learn how to defend 1v1. So those things come out at a 3v3 level. You don't have, unless you have coach that drill that at practice to just kind of put in that situation where you're defending 1v1 and are doing it well. That 3v3 is great for that. This is why again with
Agreed. Yeah.
with the teams that I'm coaching now, I tell guys we need to be really good in transition moments in where you're 3v2. 2v2, 1v1. You need to be really good at those moments, because if you can win your battle against the guy that you're going against, that means the team is going to be successful. So I do encourage, if you can play 3v3, if you can play indoor, if you can play futsal, if you can go play pickup with people that you don't know, because you're gonna learn best how to be yourself, learn how to play within yourself, and you also learn how to be creative within those realms. So it's a great, there's a lot of benefit for playing 3v3. There's a lot of benefit playing those small sided games, especially, you know talking about creativity.
100%. I think as you're saying that too, one thing that I'm remembering comes to mind is two things actually. One is like with 3v3, there's nowhere to hide, right? You're saying with 11v11, you can take a play off where you're not involved, right? You're the right side of winger, the ball's on the left side. Like you're not really involved there, right? You might be in two movements of the ball, maybe you're involved, but like you're able to take 3v3. You can't do that, and I noticed that a lot. We've had some of our teams like play 3v3, and I've coached our teams, and a lot of kids they struggle just having to be switched on the whole time they're on the field, right? And because like you said, there's so much transition. And going forward and backward. And you made a great point too. Like it makes you a better defender as well. Because I never liked to defend. I was a winger and attacking player. I never enjoyed it, right? But I learned so much about how to defend from 3v3, how to deny angles to the goal, right? Because if you're in the attacking half, it's a goal scoring opportunity,
Oh yeah.
right? Like there's so many chances. So as a defender, you've got to be ready. You've got to understand. Okay, I try to show them to the outside, or I try to show them away from the inside. Obviously, it didn't work against you guys. You guys, whatever we did, you were definitely winning your one-on-one battles, and then we were in trouble there. But I agree. There's so many benefits to it, but it's something that again is like your unstructured play back home in Lesotho. Like you brought up some other great examples, futsal and just playing pickup. Like it's a different type of soccer, but it brings out its skills and characteristics that will make you so much better when you go to the bigger game. And I think sometimes in the US we just get stuck with like so many coaches I see just are trying to play like, all right, well, we're just going to scrimmage 11v11 the whole time or play within these bigger groups, and you don't get the involvement in the action that you would if you break it down small sided. So I think it's a lot of good points you make there. So you go from playing in Louisville, and you get the opportunity then for the next level, right? For Division I soccer at Northwestern. Could you tell us a little bit about your time there and kind of what that meant to you both on and off the field?
Northwestern is a great institution. Again, and fortunately, I fell right within, the right environment for me, and for growth and for my development, um, personally and professionally. I think on the soccer side specifically, Coach Tim Lenahan, I fell right, where I thought, I could be I could be a little influential. Some of these big schools, when you go to them, there are three, four, five guys ahead of you in the pecking order. And fortunately, at Northwestern, we came in with like six freshmen, and while we didn't get to start our freshman year, we were able to learn around some of the great guys that were ahead of us, and obviously that paid dividends in the later stages where in 2011 we were able to win the regular season, um, first ever in school history, and won the Big Ten tournament as well in the same year, which again first in school history. So and all of that was because I was in the right environment for development. I was around the guys that enjoyed each other's company, because you don't get many teams with 30 30 something guys or 20 something guys that genuinely enjoy each other's company. And I thought that was one of the things that made us so successful there in my time, was we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We genuinely even still hang out to this day, and it's funny sometimes. People always talk about like, oh, this guy's always going to talk about soccer and whatnot, but it's far beyond that, and we're still involved with in each other's lives at any given time. We felt, and again, on a paper, it might have looked different, and if and for betting people, it might look different, but we felt every game that we had a chance and we could win a game, and that was true to the majority of the players. We felt that we had what it takes. We had the athleticism, we had the game IQ, we had all the intangibles that that I think without the coaches being meticulous, without the coaches being detail oriented and bringing the guys and the personalities and the characteristics that is positive for the team culture, that would have been, that wouldn't be, we wouldn't have the success that we've had. And again, it's important that the culture is at the forefront of this, and just focusing on the right characteristics that are going to be long lasting and impactful in the program.
So from that answer, I'm hearing like obviously the coach is having a role in kind of trying to craft that team and the personalities to the best of their ability. Although you never quite know how it's going to happen until everybody comes together. And I guess there's just some very good vibes and good fortune within the program. Yeah. But another thing you said there is you guys believe you could really beat anybody, and especially with a team like yours who's a first time conference champion, right? In the school history. It's not like you're coming into like an Indiana, for example, who they're the ones who are looking to dominate the Big Ten every year, right? They're one of the most storied programs in men's NCAA soccer. And so there you kind of have like a built-in expectation, a built-in belief, like, hey, this is just what we do, right? But for you guys in Northwestern, you're kind of small. You didn't really have a name for yourself. So the idea that came from me, or the concept that came from me from what you just said there, is like self-belief, right? And so it seems like you obviously personally have gone from Lesotho to the United States through the game. You're having believing in yourself. You're part of a team at Northwestern that believes in themselves. What would you say, to younger players who might be listening about or just anyone, honestly, right? It's important at all stages of life, but what would you say about the importance of self-belief to your journey to success?
The question I always ask, if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? And for me, that has been, again, this is where the military discipline has really helped me understand and realize is that unless you personally believe in yourself, then you're making it difficult for others to believe in you. So if you believe in yourself, you're essentially, that is contagious on its own. If you believe in yourself, you're dragging the guys next to you, and you're dragging whoever you to believe in the goal that you want to achieve. And I think with that, you have to have the confidence to actually go out there and do what you're set out to do. And again, the vision wasn't necessarily mine at Northwestern. I did believe in myself, but the vision was always Coach Linehan, who also believed in wanting to accomplish a certain milestone, and that's why he went out and recruited the guys that he thought had that self-determination, self-belief, and the confidence to actually go out there. So we just kind of fed into the overall mission that the coach already had, in having guys that are confident, that guys that can execute, guys that are that have that believe in themselves, to get out there and actually be productive. So I allude a lot of that to, again, I keep going back to Coach Linehan for that vision, because he had the vision. We just kind of fit into the vision that was already there. But again, confidence is really, really, really key.
And then so you go from playing at Northwestern, being success, and then ultimately find yourself crossing back over the Atlantic to Lesotho. So tell us about your work there with Kick4Life, and maybe what led to that decision, and what you did there.
Yeah, so when I was uh, you know in my last year of graduate school at Bellarmine, um, a fellow Masoto reached out to me and just said, "Hey, there's this opportunity here at Kick4Life. I know your story. After the story came out, and they wanted that experience. Having lived in Lesotho and having grown in that environment, and having experienced the U.S. environment as well, they wanted that background to kind of lead or help lead the launch of an academy there. So after a few back and forth with the then country director, Hannah Taiji, um, I thought this was a good opportunity for me to actually go back and give back to the same game, the same environment that developed me and set me on my path. So I went back, um, and was leading the academy team there, Kick4Life Academy.
Okay.
We had a residential academy there. Started with like 6 or 7 kids, and had grown to about 20-ish kids within the academy. Specific ages where you 13, you 14, um, and and now some of those kids, which has been great to watch. Some of those kids are playing in the Premier League of Lesotho, and
Amazing. Awesome.
some of them are involved in the youth and national system as well, which has been a great environment to actually watch and observe some of these kids grow, um, and just watch their development as well. And I still follow them till today, just kind of
Sure.
check in and see how they're doing. But that really has helped in terms of seeing the game in a different light. Again, having moved from Lesotho at that age, where there was no structure like Kick4Life Academy then, and going back and working with kids specifically. And again, I talk about how Lesotho influenced me and pushed me into this mental health space. I think when I was in that space at Kick4Life, I had to deal with a lot of behavioral issues with kids, and it wasn't until you go back into their family history, you go back into their background, you realize that this is just the symptoms. The cause is way, 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 way gone. Some of these kids have experienced a lot of traumatic situation, and there's a lot of anxiety, depression, and trauma in their lives that forces them to react a certain way. That forces the same behaviors. That's why I ended up thinking to myself, man,
Mm.
this would be a good way to be supportive of those individuals to go into actually learning the importance of you know dealing with some of the past traumas, some of the anxiety, some of the behavioral issues that kids
Hmm.
are dealing with in that environment. And that has opened a lot of doors for me, and just growth and professional profile has grown because of that experience.
Yeah, and I like how you said that it kind of put the game in a different light for you, or you saw it differently, because Kick4Life is obviously they're developed players, but really it's more of like a social development model, right? It's more of a way of like using the game to impact the players as people. So a little bit different type of approach. Other than like the residential academy, what were some of the different programs, or different goals of Kick4Life that you were a part of that you could share with our audience?
So again, like I said, I got to Lesotho, was working as an academy director there for a couple of years, um, and then um, I started, I transitioned into the director of football, which is overseeing all programs at at Kick4Life. That included, the senior men's and women's teams, which, by the way, the women's team was the first to actually implement equal pay.
Wow.
And that was instrumental into creating that environment, changing the perception that, again, in I don't know if you know a lot about Southern Africa, but Africa in general. Women are not seen. I know there's an issue here in the US of equal pay as well, but in Lesotho, even women playing sports or soccer specifically, there's a lot of stigma around that. Some parents assume that because their girl plays soccer, they're automatically, you know, attracted to girls, for to say in and it's been very difficult because we're trying to launch a girls academy as well, just to make sure that we're doing things on both ends. And the difficult part became actually addressing that stigma. How do you address that stigma in an environment where it is not necessarily conducive to creating those experiences, where girls can have similar experiences as boys, where women should be paid enough as the male counterparts? But again, that experience alone was also very influential in the way I view things. But again, there were other programs, especially our teams were involved in a lot of programs as well. We had what we call Girls United, which was basically teaching girls how to, deal with certain things in their lives. And we had what we call Champions United, which was another program that dealt with self-esteem, confidence, and the self-belief issues that kids at that age are experiencing. And there's so many other things that that organization was doing at the time, that when you look back, you feel the sense of pride, especially for me, like with the young kids that I worked with for 4 or 5 years in the academy, seeing them involved in the national team, seeing them actually excelling, and some of them seeing them in the US side, because we have a few kids, some in Tennessee, some in Kansas, some in Missouri. So we have kids everywhere, and the mission of of that program was to try to source those opportunities for kids to take their lives further in soccer and educationally.
Yeah, so it sounds like you definitely had your work cut out for you in terms of like culturally as well, doing something new just in general, right? You said like when you were a kid, you didn't have a structure like Kick4Life available, and now especially doing it for girls. So, and that's always the toughest thing, right? Is dealing with the culture. So how did you try to combat some of that stigma, right? Of and I've heard it in other parts of Africa too. A lot of people don't see football as like a useful activity for their kids because it takes away from schooling or working, and so they don't see a lot of like the benefits involved. So how did you guys as an organization try to deal with that on a within your community?
So we try to use, again, the student athlete model. Say, well, if kid X is not doing well in class, here's the tutoring for them. Here's other resources that can help him, and provide those resources. We had tutors on campus. We had we had qualified teachers on our program that actually looked into those things and helped kids where they needed, and tutor kids where they needed. So that approach itself kind of alleviated that excuse that we would hear from parents. Because when parents would say, oh, so and so is not doing well in the classroom because of soccer. We'll show them, here's why that's not true. We have tutoring on campus. We have teachers on campus that actually, instead of the kid going to practice today because they're not doing well in the classroom, there's a classroom, and there's a teacher there to help them. So that has been very, very influential in the way we try to change that.
So then your time with Kick4Life kind of showed you this different side of the player, right? More going into the roots of their personal experience, of their family, of their community life, those type of things that have happened, the trauma, the anxiety, the depression you mentioned, that is then showing in these symptoms of acting out, of misbehavior, of not performing in school. So then you made this decision to kind of go back to school, right? Do your graduate studies in mental health and behavioral health. So that's a big decision, and obviously is part of your goal going forward. But for an average coach who might be dealing with seeing the same thing, seeing that their player is hurting, seeing that they're in pain, seeing that they need help, but don't really have the skills to do it, what could I, as someone who doesn't have the skills or the background to really help, like what could I do as a coach?
I think we as coaches play a very important role in our players' lives than we really acknowledge or recognize. One thing that I always try to at least suggest is always have the resources to suggest for kids to seek out if they need. I think, for my experience here at Spalding, fortunately, I've been able to just say I don't necessarily wouldn't be able to go see the students that I'm working with as coach. But what I do is provide that information to go seek out behavioral health services if they need them. And sometimes you don't even have to need them. You just for maintenance purposes to make sure that everything's you're functioning okay, and learning new coping skills. Maybe around the challenges that you may be having as a player and as a student. Having those services available to you is very important. And I know especially in the especially male students or male individuals, we are reluctant to seek out mental health services.
For sure.
And the tough part is, again, just trying to remove that stigma around what mental health is and what mental health isn't, because a lot of people think mental health is just is for crazy people, is for people that are actually having problems that are visible to everybody else. No, sometimes you have successful people going to see a psychologist.
Absolutely.
Reason for that. There's a reason for that. So having those services and available for kids and students is very important to kind of try to alleviate some of that stigma around mental health and those services.
Yeah, I agree, especially having been a college male myself, and knowing that struggle. I think the worst thing for a man is to appear like weak, right? And so a lot of times we think as men in our head because we're not really thinking clearly and properly. We're judging ourselves as we're suffering. Then we think, if I talk about it, if I bring it up, then I'm going to look weak, or I don't want to put my problems on somebody else. But really, like, expressing that is such an important way to move through it, right? Like, it's easier to do that than to continue suffering. But definitely take some courage there. So yeah, I think it's in general, it's a part of the game that is growing. I think that there's a benefit to it that maybe sometimes athletes, because they have a mentor in their life, like the average student might not be connected with their professors, teachers as much as athletes. We're fortunate that we do have coaches who are with us every day for 3-4 months. They can see, how our behavior might change, how our performance might change, and really be able to give that connection. So I think it's amazing that you, as a college coach, also are developing the skills to really identify and see that. And it's a benefit to every human in your program. So now that you're finished, you're close to finishing up your studies, right? Your second master's under your belt, man. You're getting ready to close those books up. What is kind of your goal or dream going forward maybe in or outside of the game? Like what's next for you, Lepe?
Well, there's a lot pending. There's a lot of
Sure.
pending stuff, but I do like I've kind of mapped out my journey is I want to be I want to go coach at the highest level possible. The goal being coaching at the Division 1 level. Um, but again, some of these things are going to be dictated by certain factors. But I do think you know having the experience in that mental health space, having experience in an administrative side as well, has
Mm-hmm.
really put me in a good situation um, to be able to work in that setting, in the Division 1 setting, as well as I do want to get involved in the mental health in the sports psychology space as well, because I think that's another piece that I think when we see you know lack of performance from players, we automatically assume he's playing bad because of X, Y, Z, but we don't necessarily take into account the mental health of the
100%.
so
Yeah.
I think for me, having that background and having that with me as I go through as I coach, um, will really bear fruit later on in life. And whether it's working as an independent psychologist, or merging those two fields together, working being that coach that has that background, I think will be beneficial as well.
100%, 100%. Yeah, and you certainly have the experience, the qualifications to succeed in the football realm, but also that so much to offer outside of it too. And I'm sure it's something that there's no way we're going to get you completely away from soccer, from football. I'm sure just the impact
Absolutely
it's
not.
had.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. If I have to be a referee, I'll be a referee. I don't care as long as I'm
And
involved.
that's real desperation right there, to be honest with you, and courage.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it would be difficult to step away from the game.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's something that will always be stuck to. And so thank you so much for sharing, Lepe. I want to conclude this episode the same way we end every episode. Could you please complete the sentence, because football dot dot dot.
Because football, I would not be where I am today. I would not be coaching. I would not be in this
Mhm.
clinical mental health space as well. So that's that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's so closely connected with my path as well, and I think that's why we have a easy connection here. Getting to know you and having the conversation has been great. I think it's helped me to forgive you a little bit for humiliating me and my team about 17 years ago. The wounds are still there,
Unintentional,
and
unintentional.
it's all part of the game, man. I know it's not personal, but it still hurt. But yeah, it was great to have you, Lepe. We appreciate it, and I'll certainly include your LinkedIn information. Any other links you'd like to have, we'll put in the description here for anybody watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those great venues where you can find us. But thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Andrew. Have a good one.
Appreciate it.